In this video series, we're covering AI in the enterprise. And I'm proposing in this video series that we manage AI like an asset. And that's not just for cost and risk, but that's to unlock some of the innovation and use this stuff and smash through some of the barriers that are preventing us using it. And so in the last video, we covered some of the risks involved in AI. And one of those was regulatory risk. And today I want to cover an example of that. So what has just been published in August of this year is the EU AI Act for 2024. And what it does is it suggests that an organization has to classify its risk of AI within its enterprise. So you need to identify what AI are you using and what's the level of risk of that AI within the organization. So the EU has said certain things are outlawed, first of all. So, for example, you can't do a live camera feed of people's faces from the high street and feed it straight into an algorithm. You know, that sounds obvious that you shouldn't do that, but, you know, certain countries are doing that and that's been outlawed. And there's other things that have been outlawed. Then there's high risk things like, if it's, threat to life or invasion of people's privacy and so forth. And then there's a scale right down to low risk. So you need to assess the degree of risk of AI in use in your organization. It comes into force in 2 years' time, so in September 2026. So organizations have got 2 years in which to get their arms around this topic and look after it basically. And it reminds me, it's very similar to GDPR, which came into force a few years ago. And if you're not familiar with GDPR is the Europe's version of data privacy. So if you're managing personal data, even an email address around somebody's email address, you need to respect that and manage it properly. Otherwise, you face the wrath of Europe around GDPR. And it has three similarities to GDPR, this new AI Act. The first of all is that it's an act, it's not a directive. There's actually a policing body behind it and it's got teeth. So that's the first similar thing to GDPR. It's not like we'd like you to do this, it's you're going to do this and it's coming into force. The second similarity to GDPR is that GDPR, if you misuse people's personal data in Europe to an extreme extent, you get a 3% of turnover fine. And for the AI Act that's just come into force, or will come into force, you've got a 7% fine. So that's showing you how serious they're taking it in terms of mismanaging AI in the enterprise. And if you think about 7% of turnover, if you work in retail or construction or something, that's just wiped out your profit for a couple of years. That's a significant, it's a significant headline figure. And the third similarity to GDPR is the geographical scope. So with GDPR, data privacy, if you might have an office, you might have a headquarters in the US, but if you want to trade in Europe, you need to adhere to GDPR. And the same is true of this AI Act. The geographical scope is potentially global. If you're in India or the US or Australia or wherever, but you want to trade in Europe, which is, frankly, most large enterprises these days, then you need to adhere to this AI Act. And so, although it's a European legislation, it's effectively global, just similar way that we have to adopt Sarbanes-Oxley in Europe if we want to trade with the US in financial services and so forth. So it's an indication of what's coming down the pipe, which is what have you got in use in terms of AI? What's the classification of that risk? In the next video, we'll talk about, we've been speaking about how to manage AI like an asset. In the next video, we'll talk about what does a governance framework look like for actually managing it.